formally say welcome to all who have joined this Zoom event, this Zoom discussion on recent violence, continuing violence in Nigeria. I'm the projects manager of the Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust and have visited Nigeria and worked there many times. And previous to joining HART, the Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust, I was a chaplain in the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines for 20 years. The important person you're going to be meeting, other than Caroline, the important person is Hassan John. He'll be introducing himself, but Hassan John has been near to being killed many times. He's a person who rushes into situations of where violent incidents are happening, very often while the incident is continuing. Even if he arrives afterwards, it is when there is still a real possibility of ambush. But he rushes in there, and of course it's very important that independent people like Hassan do go into these situations to learn what is really happening, to learn what is happening to the people, to hear their feelings, and to see what the government security forces are doing. It's important because it's worth remembering in violent situations throughout the world that often the people who get a message out first, including a message gobbled up by the media, is the actual perpetrators of the violence and their accomplices, because of course they know when the violence is going to happen. They're part of the planning. And so often misinformation is put out and gobbled up by the media, by the perpetrators or their accomplices, however high their position, however low. The false information put out by those people, and as I say, gobbled up by the media. So persons like Hassan John who go into these situations independently are very important. Before I ask them to introduce themselves, just two basic admin things. There will be a quarter an hour at the end for questions and answers. So please, if you have a question, then there is a mechanism at the bottom of your screen to submit in writing a question anytime during the whole span of this hour. And secondly, if I personally, who have been asked to be the moderator of this meeting, do interrupt any of the participants, I'm not simply being rude. It's my function to keep things moving. And so with that, I hand over to Hassan to introduce himself. Hassan.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. You've virtually said most of it anyways. So yes, so I'm Hassan John. I have worked as a journalist since 2008, and then as a priest of the Anglican Diocese of Jos. So I've been able to carry both roles, and as a journalist, especially at the outbreak of the crisis in central Nigeria and northeastern Nigeria, where Boko Haram has been very active in the last decade. I have been a local producer for CNN, and I led the team that broke the news about the abduction of the 376 Chibok girls from Chibok in northeastern Nigeria, and other award-winning documentaries we've done, like this anti-slavery documentary from southeastern Nigeria that won an award some time back. In addition to this, a lot of coverage and reporting of all the insurgency or the attacks and the persecution a lot of region of this country faces. I have a doctorate degree with the theological seminary here in Jos at DMIN, and I've been doing a lot of research in radical Islam and much more in peace building within communities. I'm married to Hanatu, who is my dear wife, and we have 3 children that are ours. The 4th one we adopted sometime last year from one of these villages that were attacked. Her parents were killed, so she has now become our daughter. So we've just been very, very grateful to God for that opportunity to have her as part of the family. Yep, I think basically that's all to say about me. I am currently now the Director of Communications for the Church of Nigeria Anglican Communion. And as an Archdeacon, I again coordinate all the communications and do arrange everything that needs to be done with the Anglican Communion in this part of the world.
Well, very briefly,
over to Caroline.
So very briefly, I'm going to introduce myself in the way that I always do. So if you've heard me speak before, you can have a little nap. Because all I have to say about myself, in case you wonder why Baroness is sitting here, is that I'm a nurse and a social scientist by intention and qualification, a Baroness by astonishment, wasn't into politics, was the first Baroness I'd ever met, quite a shock, but of course a huge privilege because it means you speak in the House of Lords or the Senate and other bicameral parliaments. And I thought, how can I use the privilege of speaking in the House of Lords? And the idea came very clearly. It's a wonderful place to be a voice for people whose voices are not heard. And so I established HART, Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust, to help fulfill that mandate. And HART is founded to provide aid and advocacy for people suffering oppression, war, persecution, who are not being served by other major aid organizations or advocacy for political reasons or for security reasons. We work with local partners, and they're the real heroes and heroines on the front lines of freedom, where they are striving to maintain the freedom of their people. And Rev Canon Hassan is our wonderful partner in Nigeria, in Jos, and he's a very modest introduction. I always think of Hassan in terms of 3 C's: courage, commitment to help others, and particularly those in danger, and competence. Phenomenal. Whenever we need information, we send an SOS to Hassan. He sends back a beautifully well-referenced, well-documented reply, and he is an absolute hero. So it's a great privilege, Hassan, to share this evening with you. And I have a few questions, if I may. I'll put my glasses on so I can get them right. And the first question is, what is the situation currently in north and central parts of Nigeria? We do hear a bit about the violence. We don't hear much on the BBC, but we do hear it from time to time. It's hard to understand why the violence is happening and what is the cause. And you give a little bit too, if you will, of the scale of the violence in order to give some background and explanation as to what is happening and why. Thanks, Hassan.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, well, the situation here in Nigeria can be simple, but also it can be very complex. So there are different layers to the violence that we face here in Nigeria, and depending on which narrative you choose to listen to, they can come from the insurgency, particularly by Boko Haram. At first was said to be caused by poverty, then it was it just moved on to the radical Islamists who do not want Western education, and then it now also moved on to just simply those who do not want any democratic government. And all these are real. With the Fulani Herdsmen also is that it is a fight for, at first it's a fight for resources, then it is cattle rustling, and then now it is just banditry. But you know, I think the official narrative out there is that all the crises that we face and the violence are caused by climate change, which has created you know, fight for resources, and then people, tribal groups are attacking one another for land and for economic advancement. But the fact here is that there is a radical Islamic ideology that has laced and kickstarted all the crises, whether it is the radical Islamic Fulani Herdsmen or Boko Haram. I mean, Boko Haram has never denied or hidden its intention and its mission to Islamize the country and establish Sharia law, and to knock out anything that is either democratic governance or anything that is Western education. Now, Western education, as far as Boko Haram is concerned, is introduced by the church, and the church is part of those that are adulterating pure Islam, and so must be dealt with and be, you know, and be wiped out as much as possible in every community. And so Boko Haram launched on that platform. Now, with the Fulani cattle herdsmen, again, there are 2 or 3 layers. One, of course, the Fulanis, through history, have been the custodians of Islam. They established the Sokoto Caliphate that had conquered most of the territories in the early 1800s. Actually, the expansion was stopped by the British colonial administration. But with the independence, military dictatorship, and so many things that have happened in history, it just seemed as if everything to do with the Fulanis was just simply suppressed until now, with democratic freedom and liberty, people were able to express themselves. So now when we put all these things together, the third layer to this is that the Fulani come into, there are different levels in the sense that we have the nomadic Fulanis who move their cattle from one part of the country to the other. We now have those that have already settled, and they are either in governance or they're in civil society, and they're in schools and they're doing wonderfully well. But we also have those that are just, part of Fulanis that are domesticated. They just grow their cattle, they have their farms, and they just live their lives. But we are looking at here a strain of radical Fulani Islamists who have a plan and an agenda. They have been able to effectively destroy more than 50 villages, displace hundreds of thousands of people, strategically wiping out communities, carrying out a designated plan. And in all this, at the end of the day, when the interpretation comes, people now say, oh, they are Fulanis, and Fulanis are peaceful. They just are looking for resources. No, we're not talking about Fulanis as a whole. We're just looking at a particular sect that has taken up an agenda, affiliated, by the way, as our government has admitted finally, with Boko Haram and radical Islamic sects in the Maghreb. That's Al Qaeda and ISWA. So these are all the things that have come into play. Now, why I say it's complicated.
I'm going to have to bring you slowly to a conclusion, and to move on to another question.
That's right.
Just say your last sentence.
Okay, so why I say it's complicated is because when you peel out the layers, it seems as if, therefore, that everything is just muddled up, and therefore we are now having these problems because we can't seem to find the real core of the problem and get solutions to it.
Thank you, Hassan. Can you just give a very brief indication of statistics? Because the numbers killed, the numbers displaced are horrifying.
Yes. So going by records now from the Global Index of Terrorism, we now have that the Fulani, combined Fulani and Boko Haram would have killed more than 50,000 as of 2015. But we know that since after then, there have been multiple thousands of killings. So while numbers are difficult to come by, but we can say that close to 500,000 people have been killed both by Fulani cattle herdsmen and Boko Haram. Actually, Fulani herdsmen have killed more people than Boko Haram in all this violence. We have more than 3 million people that have been displaced within the central region alone, apart from the 5 million that were displaced by Boko Haram. We also now have more than 50 villages that have been completely wiped out, and 150 more that have been attacked at one point or the other, both in the central region of the country. And when I say central region, I'm talking about Plateau, Kaduna, Benue, Niger State, and now recently with Katsina and Zamfara State in northeastern Nigeria. And of course, the number of the maimed, the number of orphans and widows are just in the hundreds that we see in our communities all over the place.
So the figures are horrendous, and it's not recognized in the international media. I think you more or less answered the second question in answering the first, which was the impact on the violence of communities, which I think you have answered in terms of displacement, of killings, of loss of livelihoods, and just sheer anguish. But then to change tack a little bit, what efforts are being made in the inter-religious dialogue and reconciliation? I know you've been very active, are very active in that, but do they have any impact on the ground?
Okay, let me just add a little to the issue of the impact, because what is causing a lot of anxiety now is we now have young men and women who in the last 10 years have seen nothing but violence. Yeah. And now some of them, what they've done now, because there's massive distrust with the government, it will seem as if the government is folding its arms while they are being killed. What they've done now is they've now grouped themselves as militias, and they have now gone into fetish traditional African religion to get powers to make them invincible, and therefore they are now attacking and going on reprisals. And actually, I do know a number who have now joined the army with the hope that someday there will be vengeance. So what we're looking at now is a problem developing somewhere, sometime in the future. These young boys are now fabricating their own guns that shoot AK-47 rounds and so many of these things. So we have a problem in our hands that is waiting to explode. Yeah. Coming back to your question with the interfaith and the interreligious organizations, it's just to simply say that we've had interfaith, committees from government, both in the federal and the state government for years, and I'm not sure they've had any impact apart from the fact that the politicians just use them just to say that they're doing something and they're trying to bring reconciliation between the religions. But as far as I'm concerned, not much is happening. Indeed, I've just been made a member of one of the interfaith, the State Interfaith Religious Peace and Reconciliation Committee in Plateau State. And it's still the question I'm still asking myself, what are we doing? Because the religious leaders are brought to just have their talk. At the end of the day, they are dispersed with some kind of honorarium, but the messages never get down to the boys on the streets that are carrying the petrol bombs, that are going with the marches, and they're in the villages. So if you ask what is happening with the interreligious group, I'll say everybody come to the table with their own agenda, speaking from both corners of their mouth, and they go back and very little is happening.
Yeah, that rings horribly true and very sad. Could you say a little bit about what the Nigerian government is doing to help the situation? It may not be a very long answer.
I'll just simply say nothing, but that would not be fair. To be fair to the government, I think they've deployed a lot of security operatives. Hundreds of soldiers have been killed from the beginning of the insurgency, especially in northeastern Nigeria. But the issue is not what they're doing. The issue is how effective and how strategic are the things the government are doing to bring these killings to a stop. That's where I think the problem is. Because we do have issues of corruption, both in government and within the army. We've had monies meant for getting arms have disappeared. We have security votes by the government that is not being accounted for. And so many things that are happening around that you keep, wondering how many more, need to die, both civilians and the soldiers, to be able to make a concerted effort to bring this thing to an end.
You haven't mentioned, I think, something we were talking about before and have experienced in our visit, and that is the threat of kidnapping and hostage taking, and the extent that is occurring. Could you give us a little update on that? Because it's very serious.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in the last couple of months, we've had an escalation so much in the kidnappings and the killings, and now by Fulani Islamists, because they have come out to take responsibility. Their patrons or the association under which they operate has admitted some of the attacks and the killing in some villages. So what I'm saying, in other words, is that the attackers are known. The umbrella that is either protecting them or is, being the group that is speaking on their behalf, it's also known. The issue here is there is an escalation. So the security situation is so bad now that people can't travel out of the city centers. They get kidnapped. Schools now have been attacked and students have been kidnapped. The Greenfield University in Southern Kaduna, where about 30 were kidnapped, 6 of them have been executed, and they just dumped the bodies, and they told the government they either bring 800 million naira or they will kill all of them. And so these are the issues that have created so much anxieties, and we have now quite a number of organizations sending out travel warnings. ECOWAS has done that, and I think some embassies in Abuja here and in the country have warned their citizens to be careful where they go. As a matter of fact, big organizations have done. I know Central Bank of Nigeria has done that to its staff. So the security situation has degenerated now that it is very difficult for people to freely travel or even fly from one town to the other.
Mm-hmm. Grim situation. Do you have any suggestions about what solutions or actions, I think solutions is a euphemism, can be taken at the following levels, what people can do at community level, and I know you do a lot of work at community level, at national level, and maybe international level?
Yeah, I think at the community level, we've been working with a number of community leaders, opinion leaders to try and just sit down and have a talk and try to see how best we can live together without allowing the bitterness and the hatred and the mistrust come into, all that we're doing. So we're trying to build a momentum in the community level. Now, it is not easy because as soon as you begin, a politician makes a very ridiculous statement somewhere, or some religious leader makes a ridiculous statement, and you're just, again, people now are just wondering what is going on. So it's difficult, but I think it's much easier grassroots up. Now, within the state, the national level, I think that the Nigerian government there needs to be more pressure on the Nigerian government to do all it can to stop these killings, particularly from the international community. Because if the government is getting help, whatever level of help is getting, there must be accountability, for that. And of course, within the general communities, I'll ask for continuous prayers. People there just doesn't seem to be a way out of this, because even within the Nigerian nation, we're having groups that are asking for secession, and they just want not to be a part of this entity called Nigeria anymore. Yeah. The former military president of Nigeria just had an interview on BBC House of Service, and he's saying the same thing. I mean, all leaders are now beginning to warn the present regime to be very careful, because the bells are tolling for a breakup of this country.
Yeah. One can see it horribly escalating.
Yeah.
Can I just ask about aid? And I know we've been trying to help in Middle Belt, but what aid organizations are helping the situation in Middle Belt, where so many of the thousands to whom we've referred and the millions displaced are suffering so much?
I think I've been in these communities and these villages in the last decade, and I can say categorically that there has been very little or no aid at all, not even from the state or the federal government coming to these villages. I know that from time to time we've had assistance that has come in the UK from Barnabas Fund or Release International, and of course the tremendous work that HART has been doing, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. But outside this, and maybe what the local churches are doing, most of these villages, many of them are already displaced, and they are refugees in villages where they are actually becoming a burden to some of these communities. So little or nothing really is been coming in these communities.
You don't get anything from the British government in Middle Belt?
No, not that I know of. I think the British government has put in so much of its attention, especially through DFID, I think towards northeastern Nigeria. But within the central region, I'm not aware of any assistance that is coming from the British government.
I have asked them, and as far as I gather, nothing is going into Middle Belt. The needs are huge. But thank you for that. Rather disappointing, but the truth can be disappointing. And just two more questions. What are the recurring requests for support that you hear from the community, and maybe particularly from the women?
The communities, I think if there's anything anyone wants, is just to simply stop the killings so that they can begin to live their lives again. But that now seems to be too much to ask, more like a Hegelian, demand. So I think most of the demands now are, feeding is becoming very tough, because what the Fulani are doing now, and a reflection of what they did in the 1800s, is scorched earth policy and attacking the village, destroying and burning everything. And then they take over those communities, and these women, especially the widows and their children, can't even go back to their farms, because now there are snipers in these communities shooting anybody that comes. I mean, Caroline, if you can recall the last time you were here, your vehicle escaped one of those snipers. So that's what is, and nothing has changed since the last time you were here. Actually, if anything else, it has degenerated. You could walk into ambush anytime. So it's a major problem in these villages, because they can't go back to their farms. And even when some of these communities are wanting to rebuild those homes, they don't have the building materials. They don't have the roofing sheets, they don't have the wood, the nails and things like that. So these are immediate concerns. And for the widows, the women especially, they will have to now begin to be the breadwinners of their families. They have to raise the monies to feed their children, pay their the school fees, and buy whatever their children need. So these are some of the challenges that we are facing. We're not even talking about education, because some of these children are out of school in the last 5 years. Medical health is a major thing. The hospitals are not there anymore. So injuries we've seen, unfortunately, in one of the villages I've visited, I saw 2 or 3 people die. Actually, about 4 of them died right there when I was standing, because we couldn't do as much as just, nobody knows how to even stop bleeding of a deep gash or machete wound that is in the chest. I know there's not much we can do. So these are all the problems that we are facing.
Well, thank you for highlighting them. And just what do you think we or the international community or anyone who is concerned could actually do to help?
Let me first start by saying HART, what HART has done has been amazing. It's been life-saving, especially in the villages in Bassa area and southern Kaduna, because from last year to now, many of these women, particularly the women and children, have had food. They've had grinding machines to start some economic activity. They've had water pumps, not just for their gardens, but they also hire them out to other farmers, and they're making some money. And that has been a life changer for so many of them, and that's been amazing. From the international community and for those who might want to help, I think in the list of priorities, like I did mention, the areas of health is a major thing, feeding, and then beginning to live their lives again, whatever can be done. The women are very entrepreneurial. They want to work with their hands. If they have anything, they want to go back to their farms. They can farm. They can, produce their vegetables and anything they want to sell. The issue is they have nothing to fall back to. They can't even buy a basic hoe, to go back. We're not even talking about either getting fertilizers or getting the seedlings and things like that. Those they may be able to get around, but there are some, basic things that we take for granted that they don't even have.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Hassan.
If I could just cut in there, Hassan, could you tell us a little bit about the recent project you put in effort into to get it going with not only restoring people to their land, but the mobile health and education facilities? Just a couple of minutes on that wonderful project.
So having gone through all these villages, we've realized that the key problems there, like I did mention, is there isn't any, you can't even get painkillers, just basic medication, especially when a village has been attacked and there are many people with their injuries. Now, because of the security situation and fear of ambush, they can't leave those villages and even go to the nearest towns to even get medication, except if there's a military truck or some philanthropists that come with their vehicles to evacuate these victims. And even when they get to the hospitals, they don't, there's nobody to care for them, to settle those bills. So what we're thinking is therefore getting this little mobile medical units that will go into these villages and, provide the basic health. And if there are referrals, then that can be done, and they can now make arrangements for these referrals to be done to the big hospitals. But where there is nothing at all, a little medical van coming into those villages will be a life changer for so many people there. Then, of course, you have these children that have been out of school for months and for years. You go to a village anytime in the morning, and there are these children just playing around under mango trees, or they're just running around, hunting rats, whatever it is, digging fruits and anything to feed the family. So it's a pathetic situation. So what we are thinking, therefore, is to say, can we also have a small mobile unit? Because we do have a lot of teachers who themselves have been are not able to go to their schools. The schools have been burnt anyway, but they are also in the refugee camps or in the villages. So they have agreed they are going to volunteer, to teach these children in some kind of a mobile van that brings teaching materials, and some kind of teaching aid is available. So these are some of the projects that we're looking at.
Yeah. So you're trying to get together a team of health vans and a team of education vans to support the health workers, the nurses and the teachers who are there in the community anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that makes so much sense. And also, of course, they're not sitting targets for being bombed. I mean, they're mobile, which helps security. I think now is the time to ask people who are joining us, I'm afraid we can't see, sorry about that, if they have any questions they'd like to put to Hassan.
Before we go on to the questions, Caroline, sorry, is there anything that you would like to add to what Hassan has been saying about the greater help that the international community could give, or your observations in Nigeria?
Well, I think I'd really like to give the floor to Hassan, because I can talk anytime. But I have been, as everyone knows, immensely disappointed with and angry with the British government, with its failure to acknowledge the seriousness of what's happening and its failure to provide adequate either political support or humanitarian aid in places like Middle Belt. But I think we can have that discussion with, but I think that's my strongest point, the lack of international support. There are an increasing number of organizations which are working together and networking, and we can also talk about that. But I think the really precious thing is to hear Hassan. So any questions or anything? Hassan, is it something you wanted to say which we haven't asked about? Did you want to add anything before the questions start?
No, I mean, I think basically all the basic things. I think. Yeah.
You're ready for the questions, are you? Because a lot of questions have been coming in. And a lot of comments.
Maybe from the questions, I may be able to explain or maybe add some things.
Fine, excellent. So over to the Q&A session, and that's not being run by me.
Yeah.
Is it Max or David?
As far as you know, Hassan, I'm asking the question, yeah. As you know, Hassan, what is the best source for ongoing information? Because as you know, there's such a lack of information and there is misinformation. Have you got any suggestions? What is the best source of accurate information? What is happening?
Yes, I think the sources of information here can be very difficult. Simply because the army, especially all the security operatives, in what they call the theater of war here, have stifled any information that are coming in apart from what they want the public to hear. I know that there are some journalists and of course some media houses that have been chastised by the director, the state director of state service and the military for carrying news. So if you take any news that the government does not think it is favorable, then you are tagged as a supporter of Boko Haram and one who wants to disillusion the army. So a lot of media organizations have pulled back, and of course we have had instances where journalists themselves have been targeted and shot at by the army. I mean, I was one of them. I was shot at by a soldier in the fields where I was getting information. So that has made a lot of journalists to just simply pull out. They just don't want to get killed. So, and because those areas can be dangerous, not many people are able to get in there to get the facts as it is. So what I have relied on getting a lot of contacts within the villages and the communities, community leaders, youth leaders, opinion leaders, and residents of those communities. Because I've been there in the last 10 years, I have a network of people in there that as soon as something is happening, they give you a call and they tell you this is what is going on. And then I'm able to go in and verify everything. Sometimes they send pictures and videos, and then you're able to verify what exactly is going on. But apart from what the Nigerian government chooses to say or what the public relations officers of the army or the police, choose to say, there's very little that is coming out.
So there's no particular websites that you would especially recommend, or perhaps we can search for ones and share them on the HART website.
Yeah, so I know that the I think CSW has been doing a great work getting information. I know there is the name just had a blank now.
Yeah, but you've answered that well, and we can put some more thought into that, an answer for the benefit of others. Sorry, Caroline, I cut across you.
No, don't worry. I was just saying the Stephanos Foundation. I don't know whether.
Yes, Stephanos Foundation. Yes, has been doing.
I thought that's what you might be trying to say.
Yes, and I think also there are quite individual bloggers. They have their own little blogs, but because they are not very popular, even if their information is authentic, you know, they really are not taken very seriously. But well, we also have a platform of Nigerian journalists, especially from the different states, from where we also double check all the information we get from things that are happening either in the communities or in the fields. But so the thing is this, that unfortunately, I must say that even the reports from BBC, especially the Hausa service, has been biased and skewed sometimes, you know, just playing to some parts of the country, as much as you have from time to time, the Voice of America or Joshua Well, you know, would bring certain information. But because of their positioning, automatically, or whatever information that is coming out, it's sometimes tainted. So it's a very difficult thing to get information.
Yeah, we'll probably need to move on to the next question now. So, sorry, Hassan. If this is a religious conflict, why are Muslims also attacked?
Great question. So this is the issue. I think a good understanding of Islam will help explain this, because as far as Boko Haram is concerned, let me use Boko Haram as an example. As far as Boko Haram is concerned, every Christian is the enemy. Any moderate Muslim that does not support their cause is also an enemy, because by their interpretation of the Quran and the Hadith, they believe that unless you practice their own style of Islam, every other thing is not acceptable. And more so that there are some moderate Muslims that have cried out against Boko Haram, but they have been targets because Boko Haram interprets their stance as saying they have now gone to the side of the infidels, and therefore they are a justified target. This is on the one part, but on the other part is, I mean, when you detonate a bomb in a marketplace, you know, you definitely would hit almost everybody, Muslims inclusive. But as far as Boko Haram's interpretation is concerned, it is okay, because if they are Muslims, they are going straight to paradise anyway, so they lose nothing. So it's a skewed interpretation of the Quran and the Hadith that you find from the radical Islamists, and they will spare nobody as far as the person does not fit their own interpretation of the Quran.
Yeah, understand. Another question.
Max, I think we've
lost David there, unfortunately. He's clearly not a particularly popular question. I've got the list here, so I'll just ask you it instead, Hassan. How far are the Christians of the South helping those in the North who are being displaced?
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, not much. Not much, again, because now, so this is based on tribal or regional divide. Unfortunately, for Nigeria, we've not come out of the repercussions of the 1967 Civil War, because as far as the northern part of the country is concerned, the southern part of the country, the north is Islam and they are Hausa and they are the enemy. They would not let the south, you know, go on their own and be independent. And they feel they have the oil, they have all the economic strength to do what they can, but they are more like forced into a unity that they don't want to be a part of, at least most of them. So when it comes to even church, that has an impact because for most of the Christians that I've spoken with, even within the same denomination, the Anglican Church, you see that many down south have no idea at all of the clear picture of what is going on in the north. Well, this also, like we did talk about information, is because the government just wants to push forward its own narrative. So many people don't have a clear picture of what is going on. And therefore, they just simply believe that it is a tribal thing. And if it is a tribal thing, then a pastor told me from the south, said, look, you guys should just get arms and fight the Fulanis. You should be stronger than them. Why don't you just fight them? Why are you just staying there and allowing them to kill you? So you have that kind of a mindset, and it is a problem. So you have that also in church, and it has its own issues also.
Yeah, I think we're just getting David back now. I think I'll ask one more question, and then we can kind of go from David again. David, we were just saying about the question, how far are the Christians of the South kind of helping those who've been displaced in the North?
Right.
It's a very good answer. And I think there's another question here that kind of builds on that. And that is kind of, what is the main response to the Fulani violence from the population living in the Middle Belt? And are they hopeful for the future, or is it more of a bleak outlook?
It's very bleak, I must tell you, because you see, I think part of the problem, especially from the Western understanding and the Western narratives, is they forget that we have a history. So when I say we, the Middle Belt has a history of jihad from the Ottoman Danfodio jihad of the 1800s, and people have not forgotten that at all. It's part of the conquering army that wanted to introduce Islam, and Plateau and Benue State resisted the conquest of the jihad. Now, for them, this is just more like a deja vu. It's just like history repeating itself. So that has its own challenge. So it's not, so when you hear the narrative that, oh, well, it's just fight for resources, it's just cattle herders, farmers, farmland, the injury goes deeper than that, you know. So it's a problem. Now, what the Middle Belt, most of the Middle Belt, what they have resorted to doing now is, since the government that has the responsibility to stop the Fulani attacks has not done so, as a matter of fact, on social media, there are unfortunately known politicians that seem to have backed the Fulani attacks and the killings on the Middle Belt. So they've resorted to simply say, look, we either defend ourselves or we will die here. And if you follow, I think one of the former military generals in the Middle Belt did make that mention. I mentioned that in a public forum some time back, and it generated a lot of issues, but that's generally the feeling. So unfortunately, villages are building vigilante groups. They don't see any reconciliation because the government doesn't seem to want to stop the killings. So they feel they just have to defend themselves or they perish.
Thank you. Another question was, you have mentioned the possibility of parts of Nigeria breaking away. Do you think that is a serious possibility?
In fact, with every passing day, the reality of that is becoming stronger and stronger. Simply because if you look at the arrangement now with the southwestern part of the country, they have now instituted their own regional police. Some of the governors have asked the Fulani to leave the region and go back north where they are coming from. They are not welcome anymore. We're now having rhetorics, even from the Fulanis, who have issued a public statement. I think it's somewhere online. They've said that by birth and by they say, I think by God's divine provision, they now own. So the words they choose to use is they own the country, and they are free to live anywhere they want and take whatever land they like. So when you have this kind of rhetoric coming from politicians and Islamic scholars, even if they are not radical Muslims, but that they make this kind of statements in public, shows their inclination and their radical interpretation of the political system that is deeply entrenched in the Islamic ideology. That's why it's difficult to say that this is not religious at all, because we have videos, dozens of videos of actually from our President Buhari himself to members of his cabinet and to radical Islamic scholars that are making statements like it's better to vote in a dog into office than to vote the best Christian. It's better to put in the worst Muslim in any office rather than to put the best Christians. And these are things that are in the public domain. We've had them again and again and again from the 2015 elections till date. So when people say, no, this has nothing to do with religion, well, perhaps because they are outside the country, but these are the things that we hear in the marketplaces, on horn speakers, during, in mosques when they are doing sermons, and it's all over the place. You just need to go on YouTube and you hear some of these rhetorics.
Yeah, yeah. There's a question here which I'm not quite sure if I understand. It may be partly what we've just been speaking about, but I'll just see if there is anything that you want to say here. The agenda of the Fulani seems to be ethnic cleansing of the indigenous people, of the people who are living in certain local communities. Is there any help the international community can give with self-determination to prevent the Fulani killing other tribes? Now, I'm not quite sure what the questioner means by self-determination, but you may have some response to that.
Yeah, I think I understand what the questioner is asking.
Right.
And I think the question is saying exactly where it seems the country is heading anyway, because there has been a call to restructure the country. So the constitution is being skewed to favor a particular political pressure group in the country, particularly in the northern part of the country. So we now have what is supposed to be a federal republic with state and local councils having some level of autonomy, but that is not what is being practiced. We now have a unitary government where, so for instance, every attack that has happened in this country, with every village that has been destroyed, unless there is an explicit directive from the office of the president through either the inspector general of police or the military chiefs, nothing happens. The governors do not even have any authority to ask their police commissioners to engage in any incident that is unfolding. So this is how bad it is. And so people are saying, well, we either restructure this country where regions and states have their autonomy, and then we now have a loose federal government, or else, if there are regions that are so desperate for power, then perhaps we need to split this country into self-determined regions. And then those who choose to run their region in a whatever, either in an emirate or whatever way they choose to, then they can do that. Because again, these regions have their own history. Like if you take the Yorubas, for instance, they've had the Oduduwa kingdom, the Benin kingdom, so to say, completely distinct political structure. And then you pick the Igbos, again, another distinct political structure that is completely opposite to what you see from the Emirates if you're going to take what is happening in the north. And it's going to be almost impossible to bring these three together, except if there's a massive reform and a very loose government where there is understanding and mutual respect for every region.
Thank you. That's very well answered. And I don't know if you've still got some energy left, Hassan. I'm going to throw at you three more questions from here with just a short answer to each, just a couple of minutes, no more than that. And if you want to take a breather, I'm deliberately talking slowly now and stalling for time to give you a chance for a breather and to take a glass of water. But three questions, and then we'll go over to Caroline to bring the event to its close. But a question, is there cross-border coordination? Is there cross-border coordination between countries by Boko Haram and the Fulani? Do they work across countries?
Yes, there is. Absolutely. And I think we've been saying that for years, but somehow I think just, you know, when we said that, especially in the last couple of years, it seemed as if we were just trying to demonize the Fulani and make them look like they are terrorists, because there has been a call to designate the militia itself, the Fulani militia, as a terrorist organization, because it has killed more people than Boko Haram. But anyway, yes, there is. Because recently now, at least the security community here in Nigeria and particularly the Benue State governor has announced, and you know, that he's admitted that Boko Haram has had its influence on the Fulani, or they've been working together, or they are training and have infiltrated the Fulani to carry out, you know. So for instance, now, like I did mention from the beginning, in Niger State, Boko Haram has already hoisted its flag in 2 communities, you know, just like it did in Maiduguri. And it is a Boko Haram flag. As a matter of fact, a video has just surfaced. They've now gotten, I think, on that video about 4 or 5 Christian women that have been forced to renounce Christianity and accept Islam. And that's the video that's trending now. So we now see this. And these are enclaves that Fulanis have been residing in for a long while now, and they have been reported of training camps of Fulanis in those areas, as there are in Niger State all the way down to Zamfara. So yes, I think we can confidently say they have been this cross-border, you know, networking with the Fulanis and Iswa and Boko Haram.
Very, very well. And is there anything you would say about violence down in the southeast or southwest of Nigeria? Are the Fulani involved in that, or any of these groups involved in that as well?
There is a level of Fulani attacks and violence in the southwestern part of the country, as far as we know, because in the just recently, we've had the governor of one of the states actually visited those areas where the Fulanis had killed a number of people. And the Fulanis have actually attacked security forces and killed, I think, a number of policemen there also. So, but in addition to that, there have also been some level of banditry. Now, banditry here, this is now the government's language of banditry, because what we don't know is there are now attacks by a group of people that have not yet been identified, but are believed to be locals from that area. So they're either taking advantage of what is going on, or they form their own vigilante groups, and they are now attacking the Fulanis and actually anybody. Because so in the last month or two, the government has sent in the army, you know, to defend or to attack any vigilante or organized army that is attacking the Fulanis that are in those areas, you know, herding their cattle. So that has created another issue there, because the army, unfortunately, I think, attacked a registered military, or rather a registered security organization. And it's a little complicated, but it's more like a no man's land there. So we have vigilantes attacking the Fulanis, attacking the army, while the army is also attacking those organized vigilante groups. Yeah, perhaps it's a situation where you have very strong violent forces, which are the main causes, but of violence. But of course, that it gives the opportunity for other groups. But but it doesn't deny the fact that there are certain main forces causing the main body of the violence. There is a final question I was going to bring from all of them. I've lost my questions here, but I know what it was, and that is, could you give any idea of how many of those who are kidnapped are Christian leaders or members of the church, Christian churches? So we do have, like in Zaria, for instance, we have quite a number of this a church choir group that was kidnapped. We have, at least in the last 3 or 4 weeks, if I can recall clearly, about 5 or 6 Christian leaders, pastors that have been kidnapped. From Plateau State, we still have Reverend Zongo that has been kidnapped. Nothing has been said about him. We do have also, if my memory doesn't fail me, in Niger State, I think 2 other pastors that have been kidnapped. What we don't know is whether they've been released now, because the families have decided not to go public with what is going on. Well, they've been warned not to, both by the government and the kidnappers. So we don't know whether the ransom have been paid and they've been released now, but we don't know, because what's going on now is they now target Christians and churches, because they know that this is where the money definitely will come at, especially if they are church leaders, to kidnap them. And usually they ask for 500 million to about $1 billion, depending on the groups of people or the position of the people that they've kidnapped. Yeah, we do have quite a number that are in their hands now.
Yeah. Do you think any, including businessmen, are profiting from the Fulani?
So going by online videos that we have seen released by the police, we don't know whether it's deliberate or it was just accidental that it came on social media. We now have the Fulanis, especially those that have been arrested by the police at some point, claiming that their handlers are politicians who have been asking them. So they buy the guns for them. And when they kidnap, the ransom are paid, and then they take the money to their politicians. We have from the news day before yesterday or so that the local chief that is in Katsina State, where the home village of the president himself has been suspended from office because he's accused of being one organizing the gangs of kidnappers from his place. So yes, we do have politicians. We have actually police officers and local community leaders that have been named to be part of all this, because you'll wonder where the guns are coming from, because an AK-47 in the black market is about £1,000 plus or minus. So these young boys can't afford them, and you can see them, some carrying 2 or 3. So somebody must be funding them. Somebody must also be organizing the kidnapping. Somebody must be naming and targeting areas and people to be kidnapped.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Hassan, for answering all those questions amongst those sent in. And I think we all feel it's incredible the ground you've covered and the questions you've answered. But Caroline is now going to bring it to conclusion, and thank you.
Just before I say a heartfelt thank you, Hassan, and I know that be representing everyone who's listened to you, I just want to raise one issue very, very briefly, which hasn't been covered, and that's the issue of atrocities. We hear about the killings, we hear about the kidnappings, but you know, and you've seen us witness the atrocities that are perpetrated. And I'll just give one example of one young mother, and when her village was surrounded by the Fulani, she escaped and tried to with her 6-year-old daughter. They were surrounded. She was slashed with a machete, and then the Fulani said, your little girl would like to suck her mother's finger. So they cut off her finger and she passed out, but when she came round, her little 6-year-old daughter was dead beside her with the mother's finger stuck in her mouth. Now, there are many, many examples of that, but I just didn't want to leave this whole very, very disturbing subject without adding that dimension, because there must be a motive behind the atrocities that are being perpetrated. And there's another lady I met, one arm has been amputated, all her fingers are lost on the other. She can't do anything. You know, you must have seen hundreds of these atrocities. Would you have a 30-second word on why they add atrocities to killings and to land grabbing and to kidnappings? What's the motive behind atrocities?
Yeah, I think is to dehumanize, is to, you know, it's more like a psychological warfare. Like you rightly said, I have Bilkisu James 3 of her children, I mean, her children, 3 of them were killed. She was shot in the back. She's been into one hospital to the other, had close to about 3 or 4 different surgeries now. She's in Kano. And, you know, the whole thing, and of course, like you said, the countless rape victims that we have. The idea is to dehumanize them, is to, I don't know what words I could use, but is to just show that they've been subdued. They are now less than animals. And you know, worst of all is to say there's nothing they can do about it. So we have all these things, yeah.
Yes, I just thought it was important to put that, as it were, in the information so that people know that that is another dimension of the suffering of your people. So the time has come to say, well, I don't have adequate words to thank you, son. I mean, you've given us so much, but what you've given us is based on what you do, your courage, your commitment, your, as I said, your competence, your compassion, and you've given us a lot of energy and a lot of knowledge and wisdom, which you've shared with us. So just a huge, huge thank you beyond what I can express in words. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to all those who participated. And if you want to keep in touch, you want to learn more about what's happening, do please get in touch with us at HART directly, and we will be in touch with Hassan, and or look at our website, because a lot of the information that Hassan has provided and such other information as is available, which is not very much, is on our website. So please do keep in touch. And again, Hassan, a very, very heart, and I'm not punning on the word heart, maybe I am, a very heartfelt thank you from all of us in HART and all who participated. Now, just finish with our HART motto, because I think it's a little challenge for all of us. And we in HART are very small, as you probably know, but we do have a motto, and that is, I cannot do everything, but I must not do nothing. And if those of us who've heard Hassan tonight giving us a challenge as what's happening in country in Nigeria, I hope we'd all feel the need to do something and not do nothing. So with that HART motto, I cannot do everything, but I must not do nothing, I will just conclude by a huge thank you once again, Hassan, and assuring you of the prayers for your people, for those of us who are Christians, and also Muslims, I know also do care about your people. And then I finished with a little challenge that prayer without deeds is dead. So we do have an obligation to do what we can to help your people. But thank you for being a heroine of faith, a hero of faith and freedom on that very, very tragic front line in Nigeria today. So God bless you and your people, and thank you to everyone who's participated in what's been a very challenging and important evening. God bless, and thank you again with all my heart.